And Greer looks like he's got no shave November going on.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, you are.
Okay, members of the Management Council, welcome, and members of the public, welcome, who are joined us today. I'd ask the director if we could please take the roll.
Senator Anselmi Dalton.
Here.
Senator Dockstader. He's here. Senator Driscoll. Senator Guru.
Here.
Senator Landon.
Here.
Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Representative Barlow.
Present.
Representative Connolly.
Here.
Representative Freeman.
Here.
Representative Greer.
Here.
Representative Summers.
Here.
Vice Chairman Perkins. Chairman Harshman.
Here, and I just admitted, if you could ask again one more time, Senator Driscoll's here.
Senator Driscoll.
Present.
And
Thank you.
President Perkins, I believe, if you could call him, I think he's.
Well, don't call me. I'm right here.
Vice Chairman Perkins.
Here.
Call your name, President. Wanted you to be able to say here.
Okay.
It's all good. Welcome, members. Appreciate y'all being here. We have a pretty short agenda, and really today, not a lot of decisions to be made. A few really on some management council policies, but mainly to we appreciate folks who signed up for public comment and folks who are watching via YouTube. We want to start getting this conversation really out to a broader audience about how the 21 session is going to be held. And again, you know, as we've been trying to do, is give each other a lot of grace because these things are changing every day. And so with that, I think the first thing on our agenda really is our general session planning. And I turn it over to the director. Are you going to walk us through that, Director?
You bet, Mr. Chairman, I can do that.
And Director, I would just say that members, I do not have a split screen. So there's a few of you I can't. So boy, if I can't recognize you, please just speak in and I'll recognize you. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just by way of introduction of this document, it's 2021 General Session COVID-19 Safe Session Draft Plan. Starting this summer, at the direction of leadership, LSO staff has met with the chief clerks multiple times to try to determine the safest possible feasible way we could hold a session, a general session in January of 2021. Mr. Chairman, I'd say, you know, we first started with the determination of whether we could use a virtual format to hold a general session. After further discussion with leadership and internal discussions, that was abandoned. We just, as you all know, a general session of the Wyoming Legislature, we tried to pack 6 months into 40 days. And I think as Representative Greer says, legislating can be a contact sport. And it's just not something that you could really feasibly do a long session over a virtual platform such as Zoom without, with allowing the level of public participation and collaboration and compromise between members. So, Mr. Chairman, that is the basis of this plan, is a in-person session starting in January, but with allowing for a hybrid component to the plan so that members who are either sick with COVID or are waiting a test result for COVID can participate. Also allow members of the public and lobbyists and agencies who don't want to come to the Capitol to be able to participate remotely at standing committee meetings and through other electronic format. And Mr. Chairman, as you'll see in the second paragraph here on the document or implementation, we've also been planning for the potential possibility that the session could be delayed and that the budget hearings in December may be delayed too, if it's just deemed not to be safe enough to hold the session, or if it would be beneficial for other reasons to push the session back to a later date. If we move on to the third paragraph at staffing, I think of this one, I would hand it over to our chief clerks because this is really impact their operations more than LSOs. LSO will have a full complement of staff during the session, but as you all know, our session staff are predominantly retirees who do this as a public service, as a quasi-volunteer activity, and they are by and large in a population group that's more susceptible to complications if they were to catch COVID. And therefore, many of them are, at least right now, if not outright, decided not to come back or hesitant about coming back. So we need to plan for a session that utilizes less session staff. And that also is beneficial just to have fewer people in the building. I think as Senator Rothfuss will attest to, the less number of people we can have, less mathematical chance we will have of spreading the virus or of introducing the virus into the environment as well. So maybe if Senate Chief Clerk Ellen Thompson could start this discussion, and then House Chief Clerk Wendy Harding could also weigh in after Ellen's done.
Okay, Chief Clerk, please proceed. I think we can hear you, but we can't see you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to get my camera working. Thank you for the new camera, by the way.
I don't think it's just yet.
Low cost bidder, Matt?
Yeah, that's right.
I think you can go ahead and take us.
I'll go ahead, here we go. I'll go ahead and get started then. On the Senate side, we have approximately 1/3 of our staff that has chosen not to return for this session. A couple of those folks were planned retirements, but of course, as the director referred to, we have several people that either have existing health conditions or a condition that would preclude them from coming, or they're taking care of an elderly parent, or for whatever reason, they can risk having COVID brought into their household. So we're looking at a reduction of between 5 to 7 people on staff, out of session staff of 24. So the recommendations we had made would be to reduce the amount of paperwork perhaps necessary for the session, because as we all know, the more paper that we produce, the more people that are required to produce that paper, to distribute that paper, and sometimes to file it, to copy it. It just is a kind of a snowball rolling downhill, as we can all relate to. The plan is to try to move people to positions that we believe they can accommodate, and to hire where necessary to fill in. Of course, a lot will depend on the services that you feel are necessary in order to have a successful session.
Okay. Any questions, Chief Clerk Thompson? Okay, I think we're on to the House side. Chief Clerk Harding.
Mr. Chairman, on the House side, we are looking at needing to replace 4 people, and one of them happens to be my assistant chief clerk that moved away. The biggest question that we will have is if we are going to go with maybe a little less of the paper, would be to not bring in the 10 clerical assistants that we have used in the past. You know, that's a lot more people that are on the floor in direct contact with each of the legislators, and I think it would be beneficial to not have them on the floor. I know it makes the work a lot harder for the representatives not having the clerical assistants there doing a lot of the work for them, making their days easier. But out of the 38 people that I have on staff, I only have 3 that would not return because of COVID, but I had 4 retirees. So there would be a total of 7. You know, I echo Ellen's comments on, we want to be able to offer the most services we can to each and every one of the representatives and senators, but we want to do it in a safe environment, and we just need to protect our staff. And we do have several of our staff members that are in that age group and also in that health group that we need to watch out for.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Clerk Harding? Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Chief Clerk, the question I have, you know, to me, it's not so much about whether the bills are distributed, but what will it take to have some hard copies of, you know, right now we have a drawer that has hard copies of each bill in it. Is there a way that can be kept running during this? You know, if we have to just keep that drawer full, so to speak?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, yes, we would make sure that we would have enough staff, either from the copy center or maybe use some support clerks. We would make sure that we would have paper copies for each of the representatives. I'm not sure if we would do 60 copies, but we would have copies of the bills and of the amendments if that is the direction that you want us to take.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, a lot of thought can go into the process there as far as minimizing the number of human-human interactions as the paper that's being put together at the copy center is being transferred to the chamber. So I don't know if those types of logistical concepts are being thought through, but if we do end up with in person, I think that's an important factor to consider. Is you wouldn't want the copy center individuals to come into the chamber with the copies. You would want them to drop them off at a drop point or something along those lines and then brought in by chamber staff. So I assume that's all being discussed, but if not, I think that's one way that we can certainly help protect those individuals.
You know, Representative Greer.
Mr. Speaker, this may be just a little bit off topic, but I was thinking about this, and it was with respect to committee meetings. You know, we were talking about things being electronic, but as a chairman, I try to track all the amendments so I can coordinate with the secretary afterwards, just sort of as a double check. It also allows me to manage that meeting. So you know, there's going to be all these little nuances that certain people like that we're going to have to consider. And I personally don't have a problem going and picking up committee bills in advance just for me or something along those lines. But just all those things that go into these considerations we're making today.
Okay, Thank you, Representative Conley, and then Representative Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've got a question for both of the chief clerks. And I'm curious about how you're thinking or discussions that you've had with your staff in relation to their decisions and your thinking predicated on, honestly, kind of the way that the members in the body are following things like masking and social distancing. Has that been part of your conversation?
Okay, Chiefs, whoever wants to take that.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I will. Yes, Representative Conley, we have visited quite a little bit with our staff members, and that is how we came up with our numbers, by taking a poll of each of our staff members on how they felt, if they would be, how they felt being around the chambers if people were not masked or if they were masked. And we've taken a lot of that into consideration in many of our meetings as we have discussed and gotten through to this plan where we are today.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, so I am curious if the numbers that you're giving us are predicated on all individuals, for example, being masked. I have a hard time imagining the social distancing given our chamber sizes and the number of members.
Yeah. Chief?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conley, that is one reason why we are looking at a reduction in the staff, so that we have less people on that floor, because there are so many of you people on that floor.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think Representative Summers, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And back to Representative Greer's comment, I think it's a real apt one. I think, and maybe it's that drawer is something, is maybe you get another filing cabinet and add more bills. But I think the old timers that are on committees are going to want to have that bill in committee. You just, in order to kind of figure out your amendments, you about got to, you know, when I get on the floor, I'm less worried about reading a hard copy of a committee bill outside of my own committee, because I can kind of rely on them, and I can also kind of you know, have some knowledge of the subject. Just, I think it's easier, but certainly in committee. And then personal bills that people bring, I think we're gonna have some hard copies, because you gotta be able to amend some of them as they come through. So we're just gonna have to I don't think we have to pass them out, but certainly we have to have a depository of bills, and it's gonna be more bills than you would want to think about, I think. I think it's going to be close to the 60 if you were in the House.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I didn't get to respond to Representative Conley's question, but I would. It was a consideration for the Senate staff in terms of the inability to social distance, as well as the concern that perhaps some members would not agree to wearing masks. So that was something that Senate staff did take into consideration. We assured them that through our Legislative Service Office, everyone that has been working on the committee, that we were working to develop the best practices to see how we could make it a safe session. But that is a concern of everyone, that obviously the risk is increased. We talked about things like eliminating chaplains, eliminating student pages. I know some of the states have encountered interns coming in from the colleges, bringing COVID into the Capitol. So we were looking at all the ways that we could, in essence, wall off the session and eliminate anyone that was not absolutely necessary to being in the Capitol.
I have to unmute actually, and it's saying my internet is unstable. So if I disappear, President Perkins. Okay, I think we're ready. Are we moving on, Director? Okay, thank you, Chief Clerks.
I think so. Mr. Chairman, we're going to the fourth paragraph titled Recessing and Suspending Operations. This is if an outbreak of COVID-19 were to occur during the session after you've convened and you are actively in session, if a large number of staff and or legislators must quarantine, the legislature may decide to suspend operations and recess until a further date. Yeah, especially if we all get quarantine orders, that's 2 weeks that we would need to suspend operations. And the two scenarios that would likely trigger such a pause is a lack of quorum by members or critical staff shortage that prevents the legislature's workflow to continue. And that staff shortage, Mr. Chairman, on both LSO and session staff. I've talked to the chief clerks and I think Dan Pauly, my predecessor as director, who has returned the last 4 sessions, and this will be his 6th session coming back on just in a session capacity. We'll probably have Dan get up to speed on the duties of both chief clerks so that he can fill in. The chief clerks are going to work to figure out who we can cross-train within LSO and within their own staff on their duties as well. But there's some people that if the speaker or the Senate Appropriations Chairman were to get sick and miss significant amount of time, or other critical staff within LSO, budget, fiscal, or legal division, or bill processing. Bill processing would be big too, that would necessitate a suspension of operations. And Mr. Chairman, the Constitution completely provides for that agreement of both houses to adjourn to a later date certain.
Okay.
The next is testing, screening, and tracing procedures. Prior to session, we would recommend that all members and staff be required to take a full COVID test before coming to Cheyenne for the session, and have a negative result returned before they attend. We'll do daily screenings, temperature checks, have self-screening questions. We're also working with the Department of Health to determine what our testing operations during session are. And we're looking at the whole gamut of potential testing operations here, from rapid tests to pooled tests, to those who are symptomatic and staying at home, how they can get tested. Also contact tracing and tests for those who have been in close contact with a known COVID-19 case. If we move on to page 2, Representative Conley's question here. Face coverings will be required and other PP will be available for all staff in the Capitol complex. So LSO and session staff will wear face coverings. We've ordered other PPE, goggles, face shields, that sort of thing, plexiglass barriers for staff. Face coverings will be strongly recommended for all other individuals within the Capitol complex, and that includes legislators, members of the executive and judicial branch, lobbyists, and other members of the public. Down to the next heading, conducting the legislative session. We'll start this all off really in December with our budget hearings. And this is more known because of discussions with the Joint Appropriations Committee and leadership.
Mr. Director, just before you leave that testing, screening, tracing procedures, right at the bottom, and then actually at the top of page 2, use of PPE. And I guess, are there other we have some, schools or executive branch maybe has mask rules. Are there other legislative branches or the judicial branch, others? What are their mask rules? I know I don't want to get sidetracked. I just want to, and maybe you don't have the answer, but next time we meet, if you can kind of give us some information, hey, 15 of the 50 states are requiring masks, or 45 of the 50 states. It'd be interesting to kind of know what that's looking like around the country. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, can do. We don't have those specific numbers. I will tell you anecdotally that most states that have met have had mask requirements unless you're speaking. And then they've done that behind plexiglass or within plexiglass barriers. But
okay, so next time, like I say, I don't want to
you bet.
Deal on this, but go ahead, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate that line of questioning. I'm interested in the same answers, but on daily testing options, I'm sorry, I meant to ask a question on that one and we got ahead of it. Is the implication there that everyone would have the option to test daily but could decline daily testing, or that we're going to consider a variety of daily testing options, or what's the further meaning of the intent of that?
And maybe, Senator, not to jump on that question, maybe you can find out more of that, what other states are doing as well. I agree. I don't think we know. I'll answer that. I don't think we ever know, and I don't think the director knows. We'll have to decide that, but it'd be interesting to get more information. And go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, we've asked NCSL to poll other legislatures on just these questions, and we've had some responses come back in. As you can imagine, with when you're talking about 49 other legislatures, and a lot of them will be, we might be talking about 99 when you talk about, or 98 when you talk about different House and Senate procedures too in the various states. There are different things. Also, Senator, as you know, the availability and the different kinds of testing is developing rapidly. And what is available now might not be the same thing that's available in December or January, and maybe even we'd have better testing available in the spring too. Right now, what I didn't know is that, and I learned, is the rapid saliva tests that can come back immediately. They don't test people, won't come back with a positive if you're asymptomatic on those, is what I'm led to understand. So their value there seems incredibly limited if asymptomatic people aren't being tested as positive with that kind of test, but yet they're attractive and you get the results almost immediately. So we're still exploring those options, and we'll have more to report to everyone as we get closer to session time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're on to the budget hearings. It's been decided, at least for now, for this stage of the planning, that the agency budget hearings will be 2 weeks in December prior to session, rather than the traditional 1 week, to accommodate a condensed legislative session. And what we mean by that is, if we do that front-loaded work of JAC, hopefully we can get a budget bill in place and distribute it earlier for consideration if you all should decide to do a 30-day rather than a 40-day session this year. We'd have the budget work done and available early. JAC is going to meet in the Capitol Auditorium to accommodate social distancing, and also that's where our good tech is right now in the building as we retrofit our public meeting rooms. The auditorium and the Student Learning Center actually have the two best capabilities for remote participation. The budget department.
Sorry, Representative Summers has a question.
Mr. Chairman, just on that and where we're meeting, will the desks be moved out of JAC, or will you have all the different budget books in boxes kind of sitting behind some other kind of desk? Kind of what would that look like?
Hector?
Mr. Chairman, The desks won't be moved. You'll be on tables, but your filing cabinets are on rollers and they will be brought down there. And we will have other cabinets and bookshelves brought in for your use. And there'll be just so much more room than what we're used to, that shouldn't be an issue except for your desk itself. You will just be on tables in the auditorium.
Okay, thank you.
Budget department and agency staff will have the ability to testify in person or via Zoom. Newly appointed members to the JAC from the 66th legislature will also have the ability to join either in person or via Zoom. Public comment will be taken remotely via Zoom, email, or comment form on the legislative website. Paper distributions will be suspended, including bills, agency budgets, handouts, but they will be available through the legislature's website or SharePoint page. And we've got an alternative plan there. If we just can't do it safely, then the agency budget hearings will be conducted 100% remotely via Zoom. But that's definitely not the plan right now.
Okay, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm known for beating a dead horse, Matt, but those bills, if we have bills, and I don't care what committee it is, there's got to be a depository where you can pick up a paper bill, because in committee, you've got to have a paper bill, unless you're as adept as Glenn Moniz was, is.
Okay, anyone else? Representative Conley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, I notice on here that newly appointed members to JAC will have the ability to join in person or via Zoom. What about existing members? And again, I am curious and concerned about those who are either immunocompromised or just don't feel well. It seems like the expectation is that current members will be there in person.
Okay.
Yep. Representative Conley, great comment. No, that's right. Existing members also will have the ability to appear remotely during this meetings, either wholly or if they're under the weather. We would hope if anyone is symptomatic that they stay away and are able to participate remotely until they receive a negative test result.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, just to follow up.
Yeah.
And so again, Matt, I mean, if we're thinking about this as a document and if there'll be changes to that, I think that should be made clear in here that it's for existing members as well. But I am curious if there needs to be any rule changes or if it's just agreement by the chairs that they'll accept participation or voting by members who are not on site.
Director?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's actually all covered within your existing emergency COVID policies for Management Council for these hearings.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we're then on to the new member and all member trainings, which will be held virtually this year. Training number one is the computer training, which will take place either over Zoom or Microsoft Teams on November 12th at 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Training 2 is bill, session, statute, and the budget, and these are for new member trainings. November 18th, 8:30 to 12:30. Training 3, custom, decorum, tradition. Training 4, this is an all-member training. It's the anti-discrimination, ethics, go over the session COVID procedures that are adopted. That's December 17th, 3 hours, 9 to noon. Training number 5 is the biannual committee chairman training, and that's committee standing chairman training, hour and a half on January 5th.
Okay. Very good.
And Mr. Chairman, we've moved up that new legislator training, partially, hopefully, to get new legislators to get their bill drafts into LSO early. Get us in front of them. It's Ian's idea and Representative Barlow's to get those new members to get the bills so they don't wait until January to have us drafting them. Hopefully then to facilitate some shorter session timelines as well.
Sure. Representative Summers.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. You know, Matt, the one thing that I think is of so much value to new members is frankly a little mock-up run through the mics and how a bill works. And I think we're going to have to either take a day before session, you know, one of those days before session starts, and have an in-person, if we're going to do this thing in person, they need to be walked around that and told how it's going to occur. So I think we need to figure out how to put that in this set of trainings. Your thoughts on that?
Director, we could probably accommodate that, couldn't we?
Mr. Chairman, you certainly could. And probably what I would recommend is, you know, if we went with a session convening on January 12th, would be to have that done on January 11th. And maybe do that anyways, prior to swearing in and prior to the beginning of the session. We could do that Monday, the 11th.
Why don't we just plan on that and as we kind of move forward, work that in. And I agree with Representative Summers. I still remember my little mock session. It was in State Senator Brasso and I were debating a bill. But it is useful. You got to practice. So thank you. Good point, Representative Summers. Okay, please continue.
Mr. Chairman, the swearing in and opening ceremonies, House and Senate members will be sworn in from their desks. The justice will be asked to stand at the front of the chamber. There'll be limited guest seating, and the opening entertainment and student color guards will be suspended. You know, we also could consider, if again the COVID situation warrants it, multiple swearing in ceremonies from the House and Senate, and you know, appropriate to maintain social distancing. I alluded to this next one earlier, Mr. Chairman, but right now the plan, I think Senator Rothfuss has a question.
Well, Senator Rothfuss, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we're kind of looking at fixed points and understanding, the swearing in needs to happen that day, and it needs to be in person. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if either one of those are absolutely constitutionally required at this point.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I thought some of our conversation had to occur in the chamber.
Mr. Chairman, there's language in the Constitution, I think it's Article 6, Section 21, that members will be sworn in by a justice of the Supreme Court acting in their respective chambers. The question we're exploring, and which we don't have an answer to you, obviously the intent there was for the members and the justices to be in the halls and the House floor to which the members elected. But given the COVID pandemic, you know, our Constitution didn't contemplate us holding a session over Zoom either. And we were able to do that within our constitutional framework. So, and I can't give you a clear answer right now. We're researching this, but it's possible that maybe only the justice has to be within the floor and the member can appear remotely for the swearing in. Or maybe neither needs to be there, or most likely maybe they both need to be there. But that's something that we're looking into and can provide further guidance on later.
Okay, please continue.
Mr. Chairman, right now at this point, we're planning to not conduct a joint session for the 2021 general session. That the governor and the Chief Justice's message will be delivered through YouTube and Wyoming PBS. Other options have been explored for that, including the Cheyenne Civic Center to hold it off-site, the joint session, and to be able to socially distance better at that event. But right now, the plan is to not hold a joint session and to receive the governor and chief justice's message remotely with members at their desks in the House and the Senate.
Okay, and then Director, but we do have, I mean, if council decides, this would be a decision for the management council, correct? This is not a presiding officer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say that right now, you're probably the best group to make this decision because we would need to get it planned one way or the other.
So, but just so the council knows, we do have the Cheyenne Civic Center set aside in case we decide to do that. I think and there's probably a decision date that needs to happen, but it's not today, certainly in October. We've got till well into December probably to decide that, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so just so members know, it says suspended, but I'm not 100% on suspending that thing either. I think if we can spread it out, maybe we can still do it, and we're going to know more when we get into December. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, following on top of page 3 are some changes for the daily floor session. First one's not a change. Members of the House and Senate will convene the session in the chambers. Plexiglass shields installed around the podiums and front desks, and that's to protect staff. Plus, plexiglass shields can be installed around chamber desks. And Mr. Chairman, the way we've worded that right now, that can be an option of each member, or the presiding officers could decide to install those throughout the building or throughout the chamber. Paper distribution on the floor will be suspended. We've talked about this. We will have distribution points to Representative Summers' question and statement that there'll be limited numbers of bills, amendments, calendars, and other handouts available off the floor. And they can also be accessed through the legislature's website. Members of the public will be asked to provide electronic handouts via email to legislators. Lobby notes and other correspondence with members of the public will also be done electronically. There'll be limited seating in the public viewing galleries, and we'll ensure that there's never more members of the public than there are available seats in the galleries. Limited occupancy in lobbies as well. Floor events and ceremonies suspended with minimal exceptions by the presiding officers. We'll restrict guests from the floor except for the governor and justices and congressional delegation. Members of the House will not congregate around the podiums. They'll be asked to be one at a time at the podium, speak, and then return to their desk immediately. Telephones will be available in the chambers for any member who needs to vote remotely. And as noted throughout here, whenever a rule change to the House or Senate's required, we've noted that. Anna is already working to get those rule changes drafted for your consideration later on. We're also working on a rule change so that committee bills will be handled as mirror bills. This will save on time and also on committee meetings. This was similar to the process used during the 2020 special session. We will get second monitors at the chamber's desk for each legislator, since you'll be viewing more information electronically than you have in the past. Hand sanitizer will be available. We'll do frequent cleanings. We're also working with our General Services Division. They've got some new technology to utilize to hopefully kill viruses that will be used frequently in both the House and Senate. We would recommend suspending the morning handshakes.
Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have a couple of questions on this. The telephone availability for voting remotely. Voting is only a small part of participating in the floor proceedings. So is there consideration of going further and allowing, let's say, someone who is quarantined for COVID to participate in providing testimony or debate, participating in the debate on a question, on an amendment or whatever, providing amendments, because voting is a final act. It's not the only and probably not the most important activity that occurs on the floor. So any thoughts on that? And then why only audio? Why would we not also go broader than just audio and allow someone to be able to zoom in if they're going to be able to participate on the floor? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow, answer to your first question, you bet. We're trying to figure out ways to allow full participation for somebody who has to miss due to an illness or close contact with COVID. And I think the way you would do it if it was audio is you'd have to send an email or some sort of message to either the chief clerk or whoever's in the chair saying, hey, I would like to speak to this topic. And the reason that it's audio only and not Zoom is Zoom is not a very practical platform for doing an essentially live event, in-person event with remote participation. Now, what we could consider doing is if only those who are who are participating remotely, if they could appear on monitors at the front of the House and Senate when they wanted to speak over Zoom. And then the members would have to look and hear off of those monitors. That would be something we could investigate further.
Okay. Representative Barlow, follow up.
A second question is regarding handouts, paper copies, distribution points, etc. One of the things that we certainly bills, amendments, etc. That's a product of the legislature. That's a product of staff and of our session staff and LSO staff. But what about interactions and is there a different platform or an alternate platform besides email that we're considering for the public to interact in lobby groups, et cetera, to interact with the legislators? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow, beside being able to submit comments over the website rather than direct email, those are the two platforms I'm aware of that we're considering. If anyone else has further ideas or knows if other platforms have been considered to allow that participation, maybe Anna would know, but if she doesn't pop up with that, I've covered the field that's under consideration right now. Oh, there she is.
Go ahead.
Thank you. We are considering, that's why we use the word electronically rather than email. We are considering maybe Microsoft Teams, having a computer set up in the lobby that can go directly to each member or to specific members. So yes, it is something that we're brainstorming right now.
Okay.
Continue.
Mr. Chairman, standing committee meetings, committee members will be asked to appropriately social distance around the dais and staff tables. And the staff tables located on either side of the dais will have plexiglass installed. We'll also have some plexiglass up in the committee rooms as well, though I don't know how widespread that will be at this point in time, whether it'll just be for those members who request it. Chairs in the public meeting rooms will be removed or marked off for appropriate social distancing. There should never be more members of the public than there are available chairs in the meeting room. There are more members of the public wishing to testify than seats available. Some members will be asked to wait outside the meeting room. Those outside the meeting room will be called on by the chairman one at a time to enter the room and make their presentation and then exit the room. For meetings that draw a large crowd, an overflow room may be set up upon request. And we're going to allow remote public testimony. And we're considering upgrading our Zoom licenses to the Zoom webinar. And then we're going to live stream committee meetings through YouTube, our Slick audio, PBS, or ETS. Moving over to the top of page 4. Paper distributions, again, will be suspended, including bills, amendments, other handouts. These documents will still be available in a paper copy, though, at the meetings. They just won't be distributed so members can pick them up, and will also be accessed through the legislature's website. Public may correspond with members electronically, and they can provide their handouts electronically. Again, I think Representative Summers has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Matt, I know I've brought this up before, but the whole amendments on, when you have an amendment on the floor, the website is not going to work. I can just tell you, it is too clunky to be fast. We have to figure out some other kind of system to bring amendments into inboxes of, whether it's an email, look at your email and a hot link pops up, brings you the amendment, whatever. But the legislative website, I don't want to disparage it, but I'm going to, is too clunky to work effectively in this situation.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, we're considering it, whether there'd be a SharePoint site that might be better, that we could upload to as well. At the same time, we're uploading to the website with those. The way it works is on our system, as soon as an amendment is approved for distribution, and it's released for distribution, it's also then supposed to be published to the website. But it can get confusing with multiple amendments on the same bill, on the same reading, and especially if it's coming over already from the Senate or from the House, in the second House. I'm seeing amendments that maybe were in the original House on there as well to tell which is which. And also, I think there is a lag time on there for it to get. So could be that we could figure out a patch. And I'm not your IT go-to guy on this for sure, but could figure out a patch where when we publish on our LMS SharePoint system, that it publishes to another SharePoint site as well as to the legislative website. Anyways, we'll look at that possibility as well, and we have been considering it already.
Okay. Continue, please.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna.
Oh, Senator Rothfuss, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we're still on standing committee meetings, and actually, Director Obrecht, were you finishing up on that? I'll ask my question at the end of that in case you get it, or were you moving on?
I just have a couple more bullet points on the.
All right, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'll wait until the end.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to provide video availability in the committee rooms to vote remotely. And we'll have hand sanitizer and cleaning.
Okay, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's nothing explicit about masking in the standing committee meetings because I think it's relying back on the above discussion about PPE where it becomes optional for everybody in the Capitol complex, mandatory for staff, but optional for others, which I think is then implying that if the public are participating in one of our standing committee meetings, that it's up to them whether or not they want to wear a mask, and obviously the same for the legislators. Is that accurate as drafted?
Mr. Chairman, that is accurate.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. A quick follow-up. And you know, the impression I have, Mr. Chairman, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to try and investigate this a little bit more in terms of masking and appropriate PPE, and then have more of a discussion about this later. So what I think I'd just like to ask Director Obrecht then is the same type of information again for the public, because I think there are a few different things here where us requiring the public to always come in masked, to me, is a very different policy than requiring that all legislators always be masked versus legislators be masked when not speaking, but potentially have a chance to remove one. So basically an analysis of what others are doing with committee meetings and masking as well would be useful, or other PPE requirements.
Senator Landon.
Chairman, thank you. And Matt, I would just to think out loud for a moment as a committee chair, some of the dynamics of those meetings, we may not be able to duplicate in these days, but the overflow situation, just to speak up for our information people, sometimes there's some spontaneity to what they need to be ready to do. They don't just necessarily testify once in front of us. You know, the other situation is just not being able to adequately listen to testimony on a given bill. And sometimes it takes everybody in the room to land that piece of legislation in the right place. And so I'm sure you've thought of that. I don't know what options might exist there, but I'm a little bit uneasy with forcing too many people outside of that committee room. That's part of the reason we invested so much to get those good meeting rooms, if you know what I mean. So do you have any thoughts on that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I think your concerns are valid, and I agree with you that there will be less of an opportunity under these scenarios for that sort of group think or group decision making to occur. I do think there's some workarounds. One big one is considering less bills. Yeah, if you got more time to spend on one bill, you're able to hear it maybe on multiple sessions. Also, you know, we'd ask the public and agency folks to be flexible to, hey, if you just attend every Senate Corporations Committee meeting, maybe consider viewing them online unless the bill is really important and it's something you are going to weigh in on. So it definitely won't be perfect. There won't be anything about this session that will be perfect. It will be exactly how we do business. But I think we can figure out ways to make it work with this committee scenario.
Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow-up. Our Corporations Committee is still trying to get arms around the concept of fewer bills. So just so you know, we're working on it.
Okay, please continue. Okay, I think Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the under this bullet point, that's remote public testimony, and then the consideration of upgrading to Zoom webinar. So currently we have some deadlines for people to sign up for, in this interim, we have some deadlines for folks to sign up for providing testimony. It's 5 o'clock the day before the meeting or the day prior to the testimony. What kind of guidelines, or is this going to be at the discretion of the chairman? What kind of spontaneity, which was mentioned earlier in the discussion, is there going to be for people to participate remotely, whether it be agencies or the public? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow, I can see Anthony Serra is wanting to field this question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow. So the difference with the process that we're doing now with Zoom versus the webinar feature is the webinar feature would allow a link to be posted on the website, and then anybody could join that meeting and testify and be part of that meeting versus having to sign up and receive the invite ahead of time. So that's the difference between webinar and how we're doing meetings now. There are some disadvantages to that. One of them is you can't see the person, you can only hear them. And I think that is a Zoom security feature that they have as part of that. So that's the difference between the way we're doing meetings now versus the webinar.
Okay. Representative Barlow.
And thank, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that, Mr. Sarah. So who manages the webinar? Are we going to ask session staff to manage that? Are we going to have LSO staff? Is the chairman or vice chair going to be responsible for potentially managing that webinar? Just so I know, platform. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that is probably one of the biggest question marks we have right now of how to do this, is how we're going to manage that as staff. If that's going to be LSO staff, session staff, we're still working through those logistics because it's obviously something we've never done before.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
And then just another comment I wanted to make: the participating via video in the committee rooms. We're going to have video conferencing set up in those committee rooms. The installation is supposed to be done by the end of the year. So it's a lot more straightforward to do video in the committee rooms versus the chambers where we don't have cameras and integration into the system. So just going back to your point, Representative Barlow, about why we just said audio involvement versus not allowing video, or not being able to do video. We can do video, but the system is not set up in the chambers to do that. Right now, you have an integrated telephone system into your sound system, so folks are able to speak into the mics. You're able to hear the person on the phone on the other end. We don't have an integrated system in the chambers. Not to say that couldn't be done, but it wouldn't be high quality.
Okay. Seeing no further, please continue.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, on page 4, break room services, we limit occupancy in House and Senate break rooms. We would do individual serving, prepackaged food, water, and coffee in the House and Senate break rooms. Hospitality, suite, and extension, public meeting room break rooms would be water only. Staff changes and reductions, we've talked about this. Legislators will be asked to submit bill draft requests and amendments and research via telephone, email, or Microsoft Teams to the greatest extent possible. Suspend the legislative intern program, adult and student pages, clerical assistants in the House, copy center staff, third floor receptionist, break room staff, and LSO night copy clerk. Also, the daily prayer would be given by members of the body each day rather than an outside member of the clergy. Okay, Mr. Chairman, media, consider reserved seating in the galleries and committee rooms for the media so they have a seat. Need to figure out how we're going to use the media center, how we conduct news conferences, and if we're going to limit the number of credentials issued like we did during the special session. Those question marks will indicate those are decision points yet to be made. Miscellaneous items, we would suspend large distributions such as newspapers, candy, goodie bags, drinking utensils, etc. We'd not do informal resolutions this year. We'd consider recommending to the Construction Management Department and the State Building Commission that breakfast, lunches, and other lobbying events not be held in Hirschler West 53 and 54, and those are the conference center downstairs, and the reason is that we're going to need those spaces for overflow or to conduct meetings at good meetings locations. We'll figure out how to limit number of people in the elevators and on the stairs. Here's the rule changes: allow members to vote remotely, mirror process for committee bills, change date for bills to be submitted to LSO for introduction to before session begins or during the first week of session, eliminate or suspending all reference to paper copies and on the desk, and maybe introduce tighter bill sponsorship limits during this session. Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow had a question.
Oh, I couldn't see. I'm sorry. Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is going back to the consideration of the building commission and the use of rooms and by organizations, whether they be, public interest organizations or nonprofits or whatever, to interact and educate and et cetera. We limit only to W53, 54, but we have an entire hallway in the basement. We have other activities that happen in the Capitol, occasionally proclamations in the rotunda, et cetera, et cetera. It might be at least good to be having a discussion with the Capitol Club and some of those other folks that routinely do those type of things and have those type of events and activities about what they foresee and what they have as concerns, and also about how we maybe not advise, but consider those evening events that are often sponsored off premises and the level of interaction that we're contemplating in those two, so that we have at least some understanding of what different entities are anticipating or are comfortable with. So I think those things, we can control what happens in our halls, but we also have to be considering that things happen outside of our halls and some things happen in the adjacent halls. So I think we should have some of those discussions as well as time progresses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's a very good point, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. And the Capitol Club is also, they've sent us some comments that you've got in your email, and I think they're good comments too. We'll continue. And I guess I would say to folks who are out there watching, and these are all draft proposals, so we're throwing them out there. This is really the first public, and so we want to roll through these, and then we appreciate all that comment. It'll continue to change and improve as we keep moving forward. So thank you. Director Olbrich, continue. Oh, I ripped some comments.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just kind of the majority floor leader's comments made me think that, we can only control what happens in the building, that's for sure. But I think if we have kind of overarching goals, which are to keep, ourselves and each other safe, I mean, it goes even further than that. It goes to kind of all of the receptions that happen as well that are associated with legislative service. I mean, we're talking about lunches, but we know there's also dinners. And so what's the expectation in that regard? Or what's our goal for vision for each other and then all of those other folks? Is it that we're going to say to members, we really want you to limit exposure to other people so that you limit exposure to staff and to each other with the Capitol Club? And those other kinds of events as well. I think we all need to get on the same page. So I would ask that we kind of expand that conversation with Capitol Club to talk a little bit about those other events as well. And for us, honestly, to think about what is the message that we'll say to all members of the 66th. If we decide to continue with an in-person session, what it is that we want from them in terms of keeping each other safe. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Director, continue.
Mr. Chairman, just to wrap up this document, we've got on the last page, page 5, cleaning procedures. We're working with ANI to increase cleaning, particularly in high traffic, high touch areas within the Capitol. I mentioned the ANI is already out in front of this. They've purchased various devices. They also have a lot of PPE and just a supply of cleaning products for this. Here's where we're going to emphasize: elevators, restrooms, chambers, break rooms, printers, copiers, and other common office equipment, staircase railings, conference room, public meeting rooms, microphones, and door handles. Mr. Chairman, just kind of follow up on this. We'll have to figure out a procedure for when someone speaks to a microphone.
Right.
What do we do after that? How do we sanitize that area?
And Director, just appreciate all your work on this. And again, these and the big letters draft across that page, and it'll continue to change. And I guess it takes me back kind of the first page. And we're talking about January. These are all January. But what are you hearing out there across the country? I mean, are there folks talking about delaying? I mean, we've got the classic agrarian calendar, but there's nothing. And I guess what's going on? What are you hearing out there with the timing of these sessions across? I mean, is there a problem delaying this? We swear in January, come back in March or April? Or
Mr. Chairman, there really is, and I think the further we get into this fall and into the winter, there may be some real sense in delaying this session until the spring for a multitude of reasons. The Constitution just requires that you convene on the second Tuesday of an odd numbered year for a general session, and that year is January 12th. So we'd have to convene. Of course, we'd need to swear in the new legislature too. And if you're going to then recess to a later date, you'd probably need to adopt some rules and maybe assign bills to standing committees to potentially consider during whatever that recess may be. But yeah, Mr. Chairman, you know, there a lot of states, Colorado suspended their session. They've just went back after COVID wasn't as bad. Other states are considering postponing. The reasons to do so are numerous. If we wait until April 5th, say, the worst of the flu season will be over, so people won't be presenting with flu symptoms that could be COVID symptoms, or not as much. We'll have better weather, which will allow more fresh air to be in the building. And Wendy Matson and Anna and I had a meeting with our mechanical engineers. And while they say that our air handling system is better than most, it certainly on its own won't prevent the spread of COVID within this building. I am also hearing more and more from people that we've got a very good likelihood of having population-wide distribution of multiple vaccines for COVID by April 5th. Operation Warp Speed reported last week that likely to have 700 million doses of vaccine in the March and April timeframe, which would be enough for each American who wants one to get dosed twice. For that, we'll know more about the virus in that time, how better to combat it. We'll have the possibility of better and faster and more accurate testing. And Mr. Chairman, here's another one to consider. If the feds act to extend the CARES Act funds, or if they give us more funds, say after a new administration or after a new Congress is in place, we could then decide how to distribute those funds and not need to come back into special session to do so. And we can also use those funds ourselves for heightened testing or other precautionary measures.
When is the new Congress? Is it into January when they get? So if they did come in and pass something, it'd be 4, 6, 8 weeks anyway for Treasury to probably.
Mr. Chairman, I think we'd at least be beginning of March before we get guidance on whatever new funds may be.
So, I mean, we'd be just wrapping up. We go in January and have to probably come back special session anyway and distribute COVID CARES money. Okay, and that's a lot we don't know. We'll know more, I think, each passing week. But okay, thank you for that. I think Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, what's the latest we can go in? Because I have heard some support for a later session and some who would not be opposed, but some actually speaking out and say, yes, could we wait until a little bit later? What's the latest date we can go to, Matt? Still get our work done.
Victor.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that's a great question. And this year, you really have the luxury of not needing to pass a supplemental budget. So frankly, you don't necessarily have to meet this year at all. There's a lot of nice to haves though to be done. But after you convene on January 12th, That's the only thing the Constitution requires. You wouldn't necessarily need to come in. But to get more particular in your question, I've asked our budget fiscal staff. They've had discussions with the agencies. There are some things that we might need to do earlier rather than later. One is if Congress does act and extend CARES Act funding, all those programs you enacted during the special session will end December 30th. So if we get more CARES Act money, may need to do a bill to extend those. And the second thing, and right now we look okay, and we'll know more as we move later on, but we may come into a cash flow problem if we don't act. So simple legislation could be done during a virtual session akin to with special rules like we did in May to give the governor the ability to use SIPA or the 1% severance tax account to meet cash flow issues until you convene in April.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, can you be very specific about what you mean by convene? When we look at the Constitution saying that we have to convene, and it's apparently January 12th this year, we have to convene that day. Can you walk through what qualifies us to have convened?
Thank you. Director?
Mr. Chairman, I can tell you what qualified as convene meant in 1974 during the first budget session. That was the presiding officers coming down, looking around saying, oh, we don't have a quorum. So we convene today and we're going to adjourn until this certain date when we can have a quorum. And it was all set up. The Constitution said you may convene a budget session on, I think it's the first Monday in January, or I'm sorry, the second Monday in January. The AG had not yet opined that May was permissive and that we could do it at a later date. And so just to dot our I's and cross our T's, we came in. It could look something like that, except for the fact that we might need to have all members here anyways to get sworn in. And then to adopt rules as well. We really need to either adopt probably the rules of the 65th as the temporary rules of the 66th, maybe adopt some of these rules we talked about today, and then convene to a later date if that's the will of the body.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman? Yeah. Thank you. So as far as having folks there, what about the comfort level, for example, of sufficient number of humans for a quorum as one concept, swearing in some members remotely? What if we didn't have a full quorum of humans present? What if we had a quorum through virtual? Have we tested those scenarios, or how comfortable are we on the various options there?
Or is that something you need a little time to work on, Director?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that. And Senator, it would be just like the special session where you would need to adopt a rule to allow remote participation. But then with President Perkins, once you adopt that rule, you ratify all action that occurred prior to adoption of that rule. So we go with the same thing. So you could do adoption remotely. The question really is the swearing in remotely. But we could do the swearing in phases. We wouldn't all need, it wouldn't need to be 30 and 60 sworn in at the same time. You could do that in phases. We could convene remotely, adopt those rules, and then adjourn to a later date.
Okay, thank you. President Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you do that, I mean, you have to have presiding officers, but you don't have presiding officers. There aren't the current speaker and the president, their terms are expired. And so one of the other things you have to do is you have to actually elect your officers, don't you? And can you elect officers? Do we elect officers before or after we're sworn in?
Mr. Chairman, it happens after you're sworn in. And great point, President Perkins. That's the other thing on the agenda for that day too, is to elect officers.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, thanks. Okay, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So Matt, remind me, how much money is kind of in that one, sitting in that 1% severance account that'll trip into the permanent account if we don't act. And that would be by July 1st, I would assume.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, Representative Summers, how much money is in that account. Tamara may know, and if she does, she'll come tell us, but I don't think she's got a great idea. And Dawn was not able to attend this meeting today. So we'll find that number out for you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the number's not important, but that is what happens, right? That trips July 1st, I believe, and if we want to use that money for something else other than going to the permanent account, how much ever that is.
Right, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Well, thank you. And that's certainly an option, and we'll just keep learning as we move forward. Okay, so next, is there any other questions? We'll move on to the next item on our agenda.
Tamara might have a better idea how much is in that account.
Okay, Tamara. Ms. Ridley?
Tamara, you have to turn up your microphone.
I thought it was me. Go ahead.
Chairman, is that
better? Yeah, that's good.
I'll have to follow up with budget and fiscal staff on that number as well as that date. I think that it may be before July 1st, if I remember correctly. So we'll follow up with more information on that question.
Okay, very good. Next on our agenda, and we just finished the draft, and let me emphasize draft, general session planning. It's far from a plan, it's starting planning. And then we're actually going to skip down to draft management council policy 2002, and then we'll return back to the interim committee policy because I think that makes more of a director. What's your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, I think we might have some public comment though on that first agenda item.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. So who's running?
Anthony.
Anthony, are there folks out there who have been waiting? My apologies. Go ahead.
We've just got one individual, Chairman Harshman, and I just brought him in, Chris Merrill here.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear that.
We've got one individual, and I just brought them in, and there he is.
Okay, I can see you now. Okay, great. Well, welcome. Hey, I appreciate you sticking with us here and joining us. So the floor is yours. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Merrill. I'm the Executive Director of the Equality State Policy Center. I just real quickly want to take a step back and just thank you all for the incredible amount of work you've done this year and you're continuing to do. It's just a lot of heavy lifting, and just want to articulate my appreciation for your service to this state. So I'm sensitive to the fact that this is a draft plan, and I do have some thoughts and suggestions, but I'll try to keep them fairly high level right now since this is a work in progress. First of all, when I looked at this plan, the kind of overarching questions I had in my mind were all about, the public involvement, public participation, transparency, ensuring that the press has access to be able to cover the session adequately. And so that's where a lot of these suggestions are coming from. I'm also thinking about people, members of the public and the legislature with pre-existing conditions and health concerns. And you don't want to inadvertently shut a big segment of the even a small segment of the population out, if you don't have to. So I guess the first thing I'd say is it seems like there are a lot of persuasive arguments for going into recess until a later date. And I'm not going to go into that into depth because Director Obrecht, I think, covered a lot of the points that are that need to be considered there in terms of the benefits of waiting. The other thing I'd ask this council to consider is if you are, not only for this potential session in January or later, but just for the future, really looking closely at having that hybrid approach for legislators in both chambers, in the House and the Senate, where legislators can participate on monitors and can participate in debates. It just seems important, and to at least give that serious consideration. On the question of testimony and during committee meetings in the different format from what you have been doing, where it would be audio only, I guess I would say for audio only for the people testifying, I guess I would say audio only is better than not at all. And when it comes to the question of quality for video quality, in the chambers, I would say less than ideal video quality is better than no video at all. And the other kind of big picture consideration I'm thinking a lot about is, if you are going to limit public participation physically, as it seems like this, you would have to, and what this plan suggests, then I would think that you should seriously consider then live streaming the chambers and what's going on in both chambers throughout the session, because if we're we have to limit the number of people who can watch in person, then we should give them another opportunity, and to tune in remotely. So those are kind of my big picture suggestions. And again, sensitive to the fact that I have a lot of thoughts on the draft plan, but I think it will evolve a lot, and so I'm not going to go into great details on all of the points I have written down here. But the one question I have is, would it be valuable to collaborate or at least involve Cheyenne Regional Medical Center in the development or in thinking through this plan, just with the understanding that this could create a potential surge or a COVID cluster, and would they be prepared for that, and what would that look like? It seems like involving CRMC would be wise. Probably defining what an outbreak means, just looking specifically at the draft plan paragraph, I think it's 5, maybe it's 4, where it talks about recessing or suspending operations. Outbreak is used in quotation marks. It probably would be valuable to define that in some way, because it's kind of squishy, and it's left up to a lot of interpretation. I would also suggest in terms of the use of PPE, that right now in this draft plan, you're kind of creating like two classes of people in the Capitol, or where you have one that's required to wear masks and others are strongly encouraged. Probably a simpler approach would be to just require people to wear masks when they're in the Capitol complex. Everybody, treated the same way there. And with the understanding that, we're just all doing this to try to take care of each other. And then the concept of doing essential actions remotely as much as possible, it seems to make a lot of sense, at least early on in 2021. And so I hope this council gives that serious consideration. And I'll keep it to that today. I also, in my comments I submitted online, submitted my letter that I sent to this council on September 16th with just some ideas around how to improve public access and public participation in virtual meetings. And some of the concepts that are talked about in that letter have already been brought up by representatives on this committee and senators. And so I think there's still time to have that conversation as well. But I'm also sensitive to your time, so I'll end my comments there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you. Members, any questions of Mr. Merrill? Not that I can see on my screen. Again, really appreciate you joining us today and your comments, and certainly take those to heart. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Are there any other public comment, Anthony? I just wanted to double check before we move on the agenda.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, that is all you have as far as public comment.
Okay, and we'll move on and check back again on that. So Director had talked about skipping the next item, the committee policy, and moving to the Draft Management Council Policy 2002, and then returning back to that interim committee policy, because we might, depending on our actions, Council, we might eliminate the last two items off the agenda, basically, or shorten those up somewhat. So go ahead, Director. So members, members of the public, we're on, it's really item number 3 on the agenda, and Draft Management Council Policy 20-02. And that material, it's on our website. Folks need to find that. Okay, please go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, this item is to allow in-person meetings to resume in a defined basis or on a defined basis. And so the first is the amendments to your emergency COVID related policies, which you first adopted in April. And so this is Management Council Policy 20-02. And it continues to allow remote participation at meetings. But it states that a legislative committee can meet in the state capitol complex in Cheyenne in accordance with state and local public health orders and protocols adopted by Management Council. And those protocols are actually the next document we will discuss. All official legislative committee meetings conducted in person at the state capitol complex will be treated as indoor gatherings under applicable state and local public health orders. And then subsection F deals with committee meetings that happen outside of the Capitol complex. Any official activity of a legislative committee meeting during the interim may be conducted in person at locations other than the state Capitol complex if conducted in accordance with state and local health orders and policies of the facility where the activity is taking place. Here's the big change, the big difference between the two. LSO staff shall provide support for the official legislative committee meeting that's happening outside the Capitol complex, but will not travel to that meeting if it's not held in the Capitol complex. So, and then you also change the time effectiveness of this policy to go through the beginning of the 2021 general session. So that's the needed changes to your policy to allow in-person meetings to resume. Mr. Chairman, you'll notice that meetings outside of Cheyenne are handled like remote hybrid meetings have been approved by you. LSO staff works with the chairman and the facility in which the meeting is planned to set it up, provide IT support, set up IT support, but LSO staff does not travel to that meeting directly. Mr. Chairman, under the interim committee protocols in the state capitol complex, LSO staff will attend those meetings in a limited capacity based on my discretion, and then also working with the chairman to decide how to do that, limit staff. Staff will also participate over Zoom. Members of the legislature and the public will also still be allowed to participate over Zoom on those meetings. And we can get more into that protocol now or after you adopt the changes to this policy.
Okay. Are there any questions? Any questions? Then any, so direct, okay, Ripson Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is putting any, basically a sunset date on these. And I guess that goes back to the previous question we had about when we convene and what other activities may occur. And so I guess I'm interested to know how important that convening of the 2021 general session is to these rules, and how that might impact any other activities we want to undertake once the new legislature, the 66th, is sworn in effect. So I guess I'm a little puzzled by that, depending on how we actually convene and begin.
My internet, is that my internet or is that, okay. Representative Barlow we got the gist of that though, I think.
Yes, you bet. You bet. I did. Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow, good question. So first, once you convene, even if you recess after that, you're no longer within the interim. So you're right, these rules would not be in effect then. And interim committees would actually be in effect. Now, what might be in effect is standing committees and how they meet. And those standing committee meetings would then be based on whatever rules you adopt for the session.
There you go. And so that we'd have to be mindful of that if there is a plan to do a later start in April.
But
okay.
Have standing committees work bills potentially during that recess.
Basically, substitute that language in here, basically.
Right. That's exactly right.
Good question, Representative Barlow.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are all rules of Management Council then suspended or sunset upon the beginning of another legislature and have to be readopted, or is this unique? Thank you.
Great question. Very unique to just these COVID-related emergency policies.
Okay, very good. Okay, Director, any other questions? Any action then? We're basically, go ahead.
Motion and approval or amendment to these proposed changes.
Are there any members' questions or any motions? As I'm waiting for someone to make a motion. Okay, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, I would move adoption of the rules as presented.
Is there a second? By Senator Anselmi Dalton. And again, Director, just to really summarize, it's really kind of continuing and putting in rules what we've talked about. If you have the in-person meetings in Cheyenne, we'll work those. If they're going to be hybrid outside of Cheyenne, staff is not going to, our staff is not going to travel to those. Anything else in a short summary like that? Did I capture that or?
You captured it, and Mr. Chairman, when we go through the protocols, we'll go more in depth on what the in-person meetings at the State Capitol Complex will look like under the policy.
Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is discussion on the amendment on the red language. So in subparagraph C, there is through video conferencing platform. So I guess I need to know if we've been using Zoom. Are we contemplating other platforms? Are we contemplating something different? Or is this what everybody is used to describe and we've previously been using and is what is being outlined here? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Barlow, I think we just, when Tamara drafted this language, I'm sure what she was thinking was keep it generic if we do want to utilize another platform, but there's no, at the moment, any plan to use something besides Zoom. IT continually wants to try to figure out a way to use Teams since we already have a subscription to that. It can save us money. So we're continuing to explore that. But right now, no, it would just be through Zoom.
Okay, very good. I think Representative Conley had her hand up first, and Senator Rothfuss.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm just going to have a question on 2D. and I think it's the last sentence where it says that remote participation in a video conference by members of the public can be subject to limitations as determined by the committee chair. And so does this set up for us the possibility, if not the likelihood, that there could be different rules for participation for 10 different committees?
Go ahead, Director. No, I don't think so, but go ahead. Explain it.
Mr. Chairman, that's actually already existing. That this is what we've been working under, this language, for the entire interim. And what that allows is, we've got the procedure set up where we've got a firm deadline on when public comment needs to be submitted. But we wanted to provide the chairman with the discretion, if something came up after that deadline, that they could still receive comments on that. And Representative Conley, we've been working under that system for the last 7 months.
Go ahead, follow up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thanks. Follow up. And then, so the answer is actually yes, that this can mean that, and that's actually what we've experienced so far and have gotten a little bit of negative feedback about, is that, you are wanting to participate in education and labor, health, and minerals. And the rules about how to do that can be and have been different. Whether it's, the day before or 3 o'clock, or whether you can participate during the meeting itself without having registered ahead of time. And that has caused some confusion, is what we've heard. And in all honesty, people have been incredibly gracious about both testifying as well as committee chairs wanting to maximize it. But I am a little concerned that the way that we have been operating and what we would be adopting going forward is that we're in some way kind of pushing that forward for the next period of time, that there will be inconsistency. That's true?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's true. It won't change, except that if it's in Cheyenne at the State Capitol Complex and you're here, you can provide testimony without signing up. We'll allow live in-person testimony.
Hey, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, and I don't know, maybe this question is for you. In an earlier version, or in fact, the version that would have preceded this one on the agenda, we were looking at the Capitol only for interim meetings, and now this here is Capitol or other places. So I just want a little discussion on the thoughts of Capitol versus opening it up to every other location in Wyoming.
Okay, go ahead, Director.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, the idea being that there have been numerous requests approved by Management Council throughout this year to hold what we've come to call hybrid meetings throughout the state in various locations. Council has been steadfast that while the vast majority of those meetings were approved and that members of the committee who wanted to attend could, members of the public who wanted to attend those meetings could, there would be an online remote access possibility for committee members and for the public, and that staff would no way be required to attend those meetings, but had to, or in person at least, had to attend over Zoom. This is just a continuation of those practices without the need to ask Management Council approval, but to set clearly in policy that staff won't attend those, and that members of the committee and members of the public can't be compelled to attend those meetings in person. And then just set up the ability to meet in Cheyenne at the State Capitol Complex, where we can control the environment and the IT so much better than we can anywhere else. Allow something that looks a little bit more like our standard interim committee meeting, but still with the possibility or with the requirement of hybrid access to that meeting.
Okay, Representative Summers.
Just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman. So Matt, how much better, so the technology piece, right? So how much better, because I've heard varying stories about how effective some of the offsite meetings have been, and participation has been. And so how much difference would there be kind of in the Capitol with that technology versus scattered around the state, albeit we don't know where around the state, right? So you could end up with a really good location or a really poor location. So just compare it to what's been out there already that we have approved as management council, and tell me, you know, how much of an improvement over what we've seen would there be if we did it all at the Capitol?
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be a market improvement. And here's why, Representative Summers, is if we hold the meetings in the auditorium, that's the plan right now, is to hold all of these interim committee meetings in there. In that room, we have the ability to allow hybrid participation without the need for committee members or other people in attendance to view on their laptop or their computer screen the person who is participating in the hybrid format, or to speak directly into their computer screen and still be seen by those people who are appearing remotely. You know, we're spending a lot of money on the microphones in those rooms to make sure that they're adequate and everybody can be heard. The full room, we've got connectivity and sound system throughout the room. We also have our IT folks on site here to deal with any issues, as well as ETFs. So I think we'd see a much higher quality meeting experience here. Plus, we can social distance so much easier.
All right, Representative Conley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, now that I think about it, here we are in mid-October. Typically, the last committee meeting of an interim committee is more often than not in Cheyenne. So why would we be considering having remote meetings elsewhere in the state at this point? I mean, what is the value of that? And it seems to be honestly quite different than how we have operated in the past.
Director.
Representative Conley, I think you're right that the majority of committees hold their final meeting in Cheyenne, but not all do. And we've already received requests, at least one I sent to you from TRW to hold a meeting in Rock Springs. And I know that the Joint Agriculture wants to meet somewhere else besides Cheyenne too for their third meeting. It was simply a way to accommodate those requests and to keep the hybrid concept going and give it to the committee and those chairmen for their decision making without involving council anymore, but also not requiring staff to attend and allowing the public to participate remotely.
Okay, good. Thank you. Any further questions on the motion? Okay, any other discussion questions? Okay, sensing you're ready to vote then, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand and I'll count those hands. Okay, I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, I think. And I just 5, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I count 6. Okay, now all those opposed, please raise your hand. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna count again. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That motion has passed. Okay, any further discussion? We'll move on then to the next item on the agenda. It says the interim legislative committee meeting, COVID-19 protocols, State Capitol Complex. Director?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, this is your handout. Starts out with purpose of these protocols. Take basic steps to reduce the exposure to and transmission of COVID for individuals attending committee meetings in the State Capitol Complex. Those individuals include legislators, LSO, members of the public, and presenters. It'll be good until the 2021 general session is convened. Requirements for meeting held in person: only meet in the state capitol complex if the meeting room affords individuals the opportunity to maintain 6 feet between all individuals, or if 6 feet between individuals is not possible, the use of face coverings and physical barriers is required. Overflow space is utilized to maintain an appropriate indoor group gathering size as determined by LSO director working in your direction. All guidelines applicable to indoor gatherings under state or local health orders are adhered to, and upon request, legislators, members of the public, and prisoners are afforded the opportunity to participate in legislative committee meetings remotely. Chairman shall enforce mandatory requirements on these protocols within the primary room where the legislative committee is conducted as a matter of public decorum. So chairman don't have to, if there's an overflow room, LSO staff will take care of that. Chairman are just asked to make sure that protocols are followed in the main room. Social distancing and protective measures. To the extent possible, all individuals attending a committee meeting will maintain 6 feet distance from each other. If that's not possible, all individuals shall wear a face covering or utilize a physical barrier such as a plexiglass screen. We've got screening set up at the committee tables. No individual shall attend a committee meeting if he's sick, has symptoms of COVID, under a quarantine or isolation due to a presumptive or confirmed case of COVID, or is at close contact with someone who's got COVID. An individual who attends a legislative committee meeting who later tests positive or is presumed positive shall report that to me. This shall apply if the meeting occurred within 2 days before the onset of symptoms or 2 days prior to positive specimen collection for asymptomatic individuals. Individuals attending a legislative committee meeting shall certify in writing on a form provided by LSO that the individual agrees to adhere to these committee meeting protocols. And you'll notice this was a lot of what we discussed in June that didn't pass. Tamara then incorporated your amendments as discussed during that meeting, and this is what we came up with.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Director. And I'll go first to Senator Rothfuss and then the Majority Floor Leader Barlow.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I have to leave, unfortunately, and go teach in just a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to provide my thoughts. In general, I think this is thoughtful, but the one thing that I do think is lacking is the optional aspect of masking. And I would certainly support having that be required basically under any circumstance, with the exception of when somebody's speaking, and then that assumes that they're at least 6 feet away, which I think is now standard practice with certainly what I've been observing, for example, in confirmation hearings elsewhere in the country. And I think it's a reasonable best practice for us. If somebody wants to be present and participate in one of these meetings, then while they're not speaking, masking is an appropriate and proper response. It is the best practice. The 6 feet distance is good when you are transmitting by the larger respiratory transmission vector, but we know that at least in some circumstances there's an airborne vector that's possible. The 6 feet transmission does not provide protection for the airborne, nor does the plexiglass. And it really is a mask that's required and is recommended as the best practice there. So I hope we do end up adopting these rules, but I hope we'll make that minor change. And unfortunately, I won't be here to make that motion or vote for it because I do have to go, but I hope everyone else will be thoughtful about that because I don't think this is quite sufficient. We have a better, lower risk approach that's reasonable. My kid, my littlest one I guess my first grader wears a mask for 7 hours a day, gets through it okay, doesn't complain, takes it off when he eats. I feel like that's not too much to ask of somebody who's a full adult for an hour or two. And I hope we'll consider that. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And again, sorry to the committee that I have to take off and go do a bit of teaching.
Hey, thank you, Senator. And if you got 5 minutes, you might be able to make that motion. Okay, any other discussion? Representative Barlow, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So paragraph 1D, seems to be contrary to the rules that were just adopted, which says upon request. So it seems like we're now changing in the previous rules that we adopted. It made that a component of every meeting, and now we're saying it has to be actually requested to participate. So I guess I want a little discussion about that upon request, comma, as in relation to the rules we just adopted. That'd be my first question, and I'll take that answer, and then I have another question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Go ahead, Director. It's really, I see it as an, go ahead, you just say it.
Mr. Chairman, I think for clarity's sake, if you want to strike that upon request, that would be great.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, good. Representative Barlow, your follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I do want to just throw a word of caution out there about people having to report to the director about their medical condition. We do have protocols and contact tracing, et cetera. And I think folks are going to be a little reticent to commit on a sign-up sheet that would require them to disclose a medical condition or the potential of a medical condition. So I just throw that out there as a caution that we don't want to put up artificial barriers, nor do we want people to do things that are inappropriate and by not reporting or not participating. So I just throw that out there as a little bit of a red flag for me personally.
That's 2B. You're talking about if somebody tests positive. Okay, and you think the tracing piece, and the tracing will probably take care of itself, Director, when you think. And so maybe way to, okay, very good. Any other questions? Okay, members, any other thoughts? Is there any public comment on this? No one's. Okay, Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, it kind of lands in a public comment sort of way. I support this. I think it's well written, and I think we can strike some language, but it is in the back of my mind, and just something for us to think about going forward here. Our chairman, I hope they're not going to run into situations where we have membership who would come to Cheyenne just to kind of push the envelope. We're adopting this in good faith, and I hope that our membership, all 90 of us, would abide in good faith with this and not overstep bounds, because that would put chairman in a pretty difficult spot. You know, chairman can handle it, and we may have to, but I hope we don't have to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Okay, members. Any motions? Okay, Senator Landon.
I would move adoption, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seconded by Representative Summers. Thank you. Okay, amendments to that. Representative Barlow.
Mr. Chairman, under 1D, I would respectfully ask to strike upon request common capitalized legislators. Thank you.
Okay, and there's a second by Senator Drew. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye, or raise your hand, I should say. Okay, very good. All those opposed? Okay, that motion's passed. Other motions? Senator Anselmi Dalton.
Since Senator Rothfuss is here, I didn't think he was here. He can go ahead and make his motion.
Okay, Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move to make the masking a requirement for all members while not speaking, and then ensuring that there be a 6-foot distance available at least for those that are actively speaking. So masks on when not speaking.
Okay, seconded by Senator Anselmi Dalton, and that is kind of in that 1B and kind of in addition to that, and the director has that. Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to admit Senator Dockstader. Okay, any further discussion? My question is this really about health orders in Laramie County. and I get it, we're in the Capitol building, Capitol complex, but what would be the health orders if we were having this in Story Gym or some other place outside the complex? Director, do you have an answer to that?
Mr. Speaker, are you asking whether masks would be required?
If it's a school board meeting or a city council meeting, and I'm just wondering about the local health orders.
Mr. Chairman, I am not aware of any local Laramie County health orders that would apply to this meeting that are in addition to the state health orders currently in effect, which don't require masking, which I think allow gatherings of up to 50, but in some circumstances up to 250 or more people in a public space.
Okay, any further discussion? Questions? Okay, we're voting on the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I'll count those hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I just I got 2 screens working here. I don't see a Senator Dockstader. Hold them up there. I'm looking for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then I'll vote. So that motion has failed on a tie vote. Okay. Other motions. I know that's a tough one. Okay, Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So based on the rule that we adopted previously, these rules only apply to the Capitol complex. And I guess my interest is in understanding why they were drafted to not include meetings held elsewhere. Since we're basically talking about a legislative function, only the location is different. Would that not give guidance to our chairman, further guidance to the chairman? So maybe just some feedback from Director Obrecht. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Director?
Yep. Representative Barlow, the thought was that we hadn't provided this sort of guidance before to meetings that weren't held in Cheyenne in a hybrid context. They certainly could be adopted to a large extent. You know, part of the problem is if you meet off site, we don't know if there's overflow capacity. We don't know how big the meeting rooms are. We don't know whether you can actually conduct that meeting. There's no one there from LSO to be able to give guidance to the chairman on whether these protocols are being followed or not. So I guess, Mr. Chairman, what I felt was if we use these protocols for other facilities, we put even more of an onus on chairman than we currently are.
Okay, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, is another motion okay right now? Is that?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
Mr.
we're
Chairman, I did have a comment on the last
meeting. Representative Greer.
You know, so Mr. Speaker and committee members, my understanding is this council was concerned about the health, safety, welfare of our employees. And so if you're at an offsite location, we've said our employees, LSO staff's not going to attend. That's clear. And then we have local health orders that are in place. And things vary from county to county, city to city in the state. And I just as soon keep things simple and leave this as is. But so that was my understanding, because we were concerned about our staff and our employees as this council.
Hey, Representative Summers.
So, Mr. Chairman, I did vote against a mandatory mask order, but I do think that what I would like to make is a motion that we recommend that people wear masks in the complex, all people in the complex. So it's just a recommendation that masks be worn versus a mandatory.
Okay, so I just want to, and I'm looking at 1B, and it is mandatory if you're not if you don't have social distancing. That's the way I read that. If 6 feet between individuals not possible, all individuals should wear a face covering. That's how I read that, Director. And you're wanting to take that out, Representative Summers?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll withdraw that. I thought the last motion was to make face coverings mandatory. So I didn't realize, I guess, that it was already in here.
That's how I read it, Council. And Director, maybe you, so
right.
if possible is shall maintain distancing. That's really what we're focusing on. But where you can't do distancing, when you're walking in together or you're on the elevator together, those kind of things, it says shall wear a face mask or use a physical barrier.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Senator Drew.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So I want to make sure I understand now, because I was a little bit off there too. So that means, Matt, this question's for Director Obright. So that means everybody all the time. That's the way I got it. So if we can't maintain social distance, we're wearing a mask. That's it. Everybody, every time. Correct?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, with the one caveat that if you're behind a physical barrier, if you're behind plexiglass, so we've got plexiglass set up at the dais. So members, even when they're not talking, if they're behind the plexiglass, would not need to wear a mask. Same at the witness table. You could have two people at the witness table, but there's plexiglass barriers there and they wouldn't have to wear a mask either. Same in the audience. If you could maintain 6 feet distance from everyone else in the audience, you wouldn't have to wear a face covering under this, the way this policy is written.
Okay, very good. Any further questions? Senator Driscoll.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to make that recommended, not mandatory.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Representative Greer. Any further discussion? Senator Landon or no one? Okay. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll's motion, please raise your hand. Okay, that has 1, 2, 3, 4 votes. All those opposed to the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 votes. So that motion has failed. Okay, any further motions? Okay, members, are we ready? Do we need Representative Summers? Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can an amendment, I guess I could go through the formal process. I'll tell you what my concern is. So, and maybe Matt, you can clarify. My internet is apparently unstable, so I might be blotting in and out. So right now you could hold a meeting off-site and nobody has to wear masks, but at the Capitol, everybody would have to wear masks except if we social distance. And the theory is, and so first of all, is that correct, Matt?
That's correct.
So, I'm just trying to think through this, Mr. Chairman. So the one positive thing about that is, okay, so staff has been protected because they are on site there. And so we're protecting staff by doing this. The other side of that coin is that if we're more restrictive than what you could do outside of the Capitol, it's likely to make chairmen choose all of the meetings outside of Capitol, even though we might have better technology in the Capitol to actually carry out these meetings. So I have a concern about that. And I don't know if I want to go, I can't remake that same motion, right? I would have to rescind my vote or go through a motion to rescind, or as being on the, Matt, tell me what I have to do if I want to change and have that debate again.
Your goal is to make these off-site meetings, basically, right? You want to bring up the other policy? Is that what you want to? Yeah.
No. No, I want to rescind. I want to go back to the motion made by Senator Driscoll. I want to rehab that motion again. I may vote the same way, but I want to have the debate on whether we're forcing, in a sense, if committee chairs don't want to have a mask order, they're going to all go off site, and we're going to never know whether the technology that we have in the Capitol can actually provide a better venue for participants that are being remote. And so that's my question. So whatever I have to do to rescind that vote, or to ask for to rescind that reconsideration.
Yeah, and you can do that at the same meeting. Yep, you bet. Yep, just
so
make
I'm
the
going to do a
motion.
motion to reconsider. I'm going to make a motion to reconsider.
And there is a second by Senator Anselmi Dalton. Okay, and any debate on that? Is that debatable? Reconsider? I don't think that's debatable. Okay, we're just gonna, all those in favor of the reconsideration of that vote on the last motion, all those in favor, raise your hand. And what this does, if it's affirmative, we'll just open this back up again.
With
Okay.
the original question
So
back.
raise your hand if you want to bring the original question back. That's correct. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed. 1, 2. That motion is passed. 3. So, okay, we're back on the previous question, and that is whether it should be recommended or be amended to say just recommended, not shall, basically. And the director knows the language, right? Okay, in further discussion, Representative Summers.
So, Mr. Chairman, is this debatable now? That's my question. I assume it is.
You know,
it is not.
It's not under the. It's not if you were on the floor. But what Mason says is the committee proceedings are less formal. I think that your joint interim committee sample rules are silent as to whether it's debatable or not. So it's probably at the chairman's discretion on whether this is debatable or whether it's just in the same form as before the motion to reconsider.
Let's debate it and talk it out. Let's keep it going here. Go ahead, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I'm likely still unstable on my internet. I'm going to support this motion that was made by Senator Driscoll, and the reason I am is I want to see some meetings in Cheyenne, and I don't want a mandatory mask order to prevent that from happening, because I think if we have better technology, people are going to want to move there. And so even though I do support wearing masks, I'm, as far as mandatory, no committee chair is probably at this point going to do that because there's too many people split within the committee. Now the question is, and I'd like to hear some debate on this, are we opening up staff for more contact and more likelihood of causing them issues? So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Go ahead, Senator Landon. And
Chairman, to answer the representative's question, I hope not. I hope we're not subjecting staff to anything that would go beyond what safety we've already talked about. What this would do, and why I'm supporting the motion in part, is because I'm just not sure how you're going to police this. It's all subjective. I mean, if I see some of my committee members 3 feet apart without masks on, am I really going to call them out? And if I do, what am I going to request that, what if they say it's really none of your business and I'm not going to change my behavior? I just don't think we need that right now. So I think we recommend it. We can even start our meetings that way. We can as chairman, we can say, look, I think it would be wise if you can, let's wear some masks, today. But anyway, I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Any other, Representative Conley?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I will continue to resist the motion. First, we heard from Director Obrick that the committee rooms that we're going to have set up in the Capitol are the large ones, with the idea that there will be the social distancing. Right? That is the idea behind it. And that we'll have all committee members there, and they'll be 6 feet apart, right? That would mean that there wouldn't necessarily need to be a mask in that case. It is only if you can't do the social distancing that then the use of face coverings and physical barriers is required. This is the way that we protect staff. This is it. We're using one of our kind of large rooms. We're going to have good technology in there so that folks can Zoom in. We're going to have staff there in order to facilitate us having the best possible experience for the committee as well as the public. And we're going to protect staff and each other. I say we should follow this. This is what makes sense. And then we had this conversation before about what happens when you're kind of out in the halls or going to restrooms, right? The expectation is that you either keep that 6 feet distance or you put a mask on. Again, this seems reasonable to me, and the way that it's written seems reasonable to me, especially if we're not going with a mandatory mask order like that was a previous motion that went down on a 6-6 vote, right? This is keeping what it is right now and says, right, you need a mask if you can't social distance. We plan on having it in a room where we are social distance. So this seems reasonable to me. So I'll stay with a no vote. I also, and I want to just kind of address Senator Landon and committee chairs a bit. You know, we have committee chairs responsible for decorum, and they do an exceptional job. Right? They kind of read the decorum rules. They have rules about cell phones. They do an exceptional job. Saying that these are what our rules are right now, because we're in a pandemic, I'm confident they can do it because they maintain order all the time. And again, do so well. So I want to keep the recommendation, the requirements as they exist now. And so I'll be a no vote. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, so as we vote again, okay, Senator Grew.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And this has been a gut wrencher for me all day. I'm trying to divorce myself from the future, from the present, hoping that in the future things are going to get to a point where we can all meet together and do so safely. And I believe and hope that that's the case versus today, right now, what's happening. And I look upon this vote as a vote about today. And right now, I think the thing, I believe that that what we should be doing is wearing masks. And I think we should be required to. And I think we need to lead by example on this one. I hope that the day comes soon, and I'm willing to wait and take votes about what we're going to do with the session later when we know more. We know more today than we knew 2 months ago. And things are maybe a little bit worse today than they were 2 months ago as far as, outbreaks in certain areas. So that's why I'm against this motion. And so that's the now, and in hopes that actually we can do it differently later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And so as we vote on this, an aye vote would be to get rid of what is written there, to support the original motion, and no. So your aye is still an aye and your no is still a no. So there's no confusion on that. Representative Freeman.
Just a question, Mr. Chairman. These rules cease to exist once the new session comes in. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's why I'm going to vote no, members, just because I think as we get through this period of time, I think it shows good leadership on our part. I think, frankly, I'm living this every day, right? We got 13,000 kids in our school system, or 12,000, 3,000 adults. And it's working, I think, frankly, because we're all doing our little part. And I don't think I mean, we've done a lot tougher things in our country than wear a mask while we're within 6 feet. And I just think we'll get through this, and then we'll take them off and we'll move forward. So I'm going to vote no on this thing, and we'll keep our distance. And if not, when I go to the bathroom, I'll throw the mask on while I'm walking by all of you. It's not a big deal. Okay, Representative Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do appreciate the discussion. I still think there's a cognitive dissonance going on between things that are occurring in the Capitol and outside the Capitol. I'll vote no here, and I'll still maintain that we should have similar protocols for legislative activities, whether they're in the Capitol or not. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so all those in favor of Senator Driscoll's, we're on that original question motion, please raise your hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that, and I can't see Senator Dockstader. Is he on? I don't see him. So I count 5. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that motion has failed. Okay, so the policy.
Mr. Chairman, are you voting?
Yeah, I voted. It was tied.
Then I don't think so. I think maybe you should do that vote again.
Okay, let's start over. All those in favor of Senator Driscoll, we want to make sure we're clear because I'm only working on one screen here. Raise your hand. Let's do this again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Does everybody see that? Everybody agree with me? That's 5. Okay, all those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, and when I say that motion has failed, that's my vote. That's how that works. Okay, so that motion failed 5 to 6. Okay, any other motions then on this? Senator Anselmi Dalton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Representative Barlow that it concerns me that, you know, they're hosting outside and not trying to do things. The one that we talked about with TRW, they would do in our ballroom, which is huge, and I would give them the ballroom if they want to do so, because it's huge and can socially distance. I think the chairman should be responsible if they're going to ask for it to be somewhere else for ensuring that there's enough room to social distance in the places where they go. And I think it has to fall on the chairman's shoulders because obviously LSO staff will not be going. And so I would say, you know, maybe put in something like that where if it's going to be outside, that the chairman has the responsibility to ensure there's room for social distancing in whatever forum or venue they pick. And ask for a second.
Okay. There is a second. Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I don't understand the motion.
Maybe, I guess I'm a little clarity on that. Director, we're kind of, I guess this is a different part of the policy. That's my only thing on this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if these protocols are only applicable to meetings within the state capitol complex. So it'd take some broader amendments to make them apply to meetings outside the complex. I would just point out that wherever you meet outside, you've got to follow the rules of that facility and the local health rules in place. So if it's at a school and the schools require masks, you've got to wear masks there. If it's in a private business and the private business owner requires masks, the committee would be expected to follow that. Same with the university or college, I think. So just wanted to point that out, that one, it would take some substantial amending to make this protocol apply to other meetings and that other point too.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anselmi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, if it's an issue, then for it to be reworked, I'm fine with withdrawing. I just was interested in what Representative Barlow was discussing and just trying to think of a solution, but I'm not really going to cry any tears if it's withdrawn. I don't know how my second fails.
Okay, so that's been withdrawn. Is that okay? Okay, members, are there any other amendments to this on meetings in the Capitol complex? Okay, seeing none, there's been just really that one amendment then that Representative Barlow had. Okay, as amended, all those then in favor of the policy, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. All those opposed, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. That has been adopted. Okay. Now, members, we have 2 other items on the agenda, but I think with our actions, we've probably solved those. Those are requests for a meeting in the Capitol and a meeting, a hybrid meeting. And I think by our previous action, we have went ahead and solved those issues for those chairmen. Okay, anything else before the council? Director, anything?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've got 3 items for you to consider. 2 years ago, we did this by email ballot, and I didn't put it on the agenda for this year, but it's new legislator per diem and new committee member compensation. There's 3 items. The first is the 2020 legislative budget bill appropriated money to the extent authorized by Management Council for legislators elect and newly appointed legislators to receive mileage per diem and an amount equal to legislative salary to attend new legislator training. I think that the motion today should be to allow an amount equal to legislative salary, just because all of the meetings will be happening remotely. So you don't need to authorize per diem or mileage for those new legislator trainings. So the motion would be to authorize an amount equal to legislative salary for new members to attend new member training.
Okay.
So moved.
Moved by Representative Summers, seconded by Representative Freeman. Yeah, removing the per diem and the mileage. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Opposed? Okay, that motion is passed. Director?
Okay, next motion or next item to consider is you've traditionally authorized mileage and per diem, but not salary for returning members and newly elected members who attend meetings for the newly assigned committees, between the November caucus and the beginning of the 2021 general session. This reimbursement is available only to attend meetings for the committee to which members have been assigned for the 21-22 biennium. So the motion would be move to authorize mileage and per diem for new committee members to attend upcoming committee meetings for committees to which they're assigned for the 21-22 biennium.
Okay, your motion on that?
So moved.
By Representative Freeman, seconded by Representative Summers. Any discussion? Vice Chairman Perkins. I think you're muted.
Question on this one. You know, in the past, the budget hearings were only a week. Now they're scheduled for potentially 2 weeks. You've got individuals that, you know, you're asking now, those individuals to now serve without legislative pay for up to 2 weeks. I would make a motion that, you know, fair is fair, but, you know, that after 2 days of legislative hearings, that those individuals attending the general appropriations hearings be paid salary. So that would put them on a, anyway, that's just, you know, that's an issue that if you got 2 weeks, there you go. Anyway, thank you, Mr.
Okay, seconded by Representative Summers. Director, it's an amount equal to salary, but not salary, right? That's because you can't actually pay them. Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, that's actually the third motion here. So maybe we just ask President Perkins to withdraw that, and you'll vote on that separately on this third one.
Is that okay, President?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, seconds okay with that? Okay. Okay, so we're back on the original motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Opposed? Okay, that motion is passed. Now we're on the third one, Director.
Okay, last one. For the newly appointed members of JAC, mileage per diem and salary, And it's always been salary, and here's why. Because nobody's ever appointed a brand new legislator to join appropriations committee.
Okay.
So you can give salary to existing.
There you go.
Yep.
Okay.
And salary have been authorized by council for at least the last 3 biennia due to that committee's heavy workload, which is Vice Chairman Perkins pointed out is even heavier this year. So the motion would be to authorize mileage per diem and salary for new members of JAC to attend budget hearings.
That's the motion by Vice Chairman Perkins, and was that seconded by Representative Summers? Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Those opposed? Okay, that motion is passed. Director, anything else before the council? I've got 2% on my computer. I've got you all dimmed down. I'm trying to ride you out here. I don't have my charger. Okay. So, Mr. Vice Chair, if I butt out, you'll wrap her up. Okay. Is there anything else, members, before the council? Members, anything else? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, real quickly, I just wanted to encourage leadership to think about putting on an agenda, an email that was sent to us by Senator Ellis today. I thought she had some good points to make at a future committee meeting, or council meeting. I would encourage us to at least take a look at that. So I promised I would bring that, and I did. So
okay, thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Director.
Mr. Chairman, I would only say on the 2021 general session planning, we'll get the items asked for today as far as surveys of other legislatures and what they have done. We'll also work to incorporate your changes to that document, and then set a meeting up after the general election, and maybe at that meeting consider listening sessions or some other mechanism to reach a broader audience of membership with this discussion.
I agree. That'll be good. Okay, Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Matt, you know, I'm going to beat my dead horse again on the amendment issue during session. I need to know a reason why they can't be emailed out. So, you know, all House members' amendment gets emailed out. It's right on your computer. You don't have to go search through SharePoint, which is click, 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 you know. And so I need an answer why we can't do it that way.
We'll work on it.
And I think we can do it that way. It's just that your inbox gets so cluttered. So I think that we could use that platform too, email. I don't think there's any reason we could.
We might be able to make a special folder those things go right into.
Yeah, get a rule, right?
Okay, I'm down to 1%. Not that that's any pressure, members, because Vice President Perkins, Vice Chairman, can wrap it up.
Actually, I've got to go, so we better adjourn this puppy.
Okay, anything else for the council? And then we'll get together for another meeting date here. We'll pull you here as we move forward. So appreciate everyone's work, and keep up the good work, and it's all going to be good. Count our blessings and move forward. Big, wonderful Wyoming.